What's good, everybody? What's going on? I know it's been a minute since I've posted to my YouTube channel any videos and things of that nature. But I want to welcome y'all to the porch. For those of you that don't know, which I'm sure it's a lot of you, my dad passed away on January 31st of this year. And since then it's been a lot going on mentally, emotionally, spiritually, even physically. And so I had to give some thought to how I wanted to do this video, because I don't want to do it in a way where it's like I'm bashing the medical system or anything like that. It's more so for people to be aware of what's going on. And I was going to give like the whole rundown of, what happened on this day and then the next day and then the next day. And I just decided that I don't want to do that. What I want to focus more so on is understand that when you have a loved one that goes to the hospital with COVID, they have a protocol in place now. And the protocol is different at each hospital. So it doesn't matter. So it's not consistent across the city. It's not consistent across the state. So if you go to University of Chicago, which is where my father wanted to go to, if you go there, they have a protocol in place. If you go to South Shore Hospital, they have a protocol in place. If you go to Christ Advocate, they have a protocol in place. If you go to Rush, so everybody has a different way that they're attacking it. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but that's what it is. And so another thing is at University of Chicago, they're doing a 20-day quarantine, which doesn't make sense to me because, so to backtrack, my parents tested positive on, my mom tested positive on the 10th. My dad tested positive 3 days later on the 13th. Still so many questions of how they acquired it. That's been bothering me. The fact that they both had been fine up until the point that they chose to get the vaccine has been bothering me, but it's, it is what it is. You know what I'm saying? So they both tested positive, and my mom, she kept eating and drinking and getting up or whatever. And I would go down there and check on them. And my dad would be like, I'm doing okay. I'm feeling a little better. We drinking plenty of water. We eating this, that, whatever. So I wasn't super concerned. But by the time the 20th rolled around, 7 days later, he asked my mom to take him to the ER at the University of Chicago. And that hospital was chosen because, all glory to God, my dad was a transplant recipient of a kidney, and that surgery was done at the University of Chicago. And so he felt safe going to that hospital to, have them treat him. Again, we didn't know that there were certain protocols in place and certain things that they were, going to do. The quarantine period, to get back to the quarantine period, is 20 days. And they don't take the results of where you tested at. So my parents tested at their healthcare provider, which was their doctor's offices. It wasn't a walk-up clinic. It wasn't one of those places that you can go to on the street and just say, hey, I want to get a COVID test, whatever. It was their doctor's office, right? The university would not take into account those results. They tested him, and then they started a 20-day quarantine period from the date that they tested him. So if he went in there on the 20th and he tested positive on the 20th, then that means we can't come in to see him until 20 days later, which would have been sometime in February had he survived, right? Now, that part doesn't make sense because CPS is allowing students, staff to come back in the building after 5 days of quarantining, and 10 days, I think, max if you have symptoms. So make it make sense. And somebody I know who works at the hospital, said that they only have to quarantine for 5 days if they don't have symptoms, and then they could come back to work. So you're keeping people away from their loved ones for 20 days. 20 days. On top of that, my dad sat in the ER for 3 days before he was admitted to the ICU. He was in the ER for 3 days. And they tell you that, oh, the ER is overran, the ER is this, that, whatever. Most of these hospitals don't have a host of ER beds to begin with. So the narrative is painted like they got hundreds of beds in the ER and it's just overran. They don't have that many beds in the ER. I don't know off top how many beds University of Chicago has in the ER, but the ER, the ICU, they have 4 different ICUs, but each ICU also doesn't have a host of beds because, again, he was in the ER for 3 days waiting to be admitted to the ICU. Next thing, at the University of Chicago, remdesivir and dexamethasone. I may be mispronouncing the dexamethasone, but in any case, those are the 2 drugs that they use to treat COVID. Now, for patients that are compromised, we found out that they should be given the monoclonal antibodies. Monoclonal antibodies are something that they would inject into you like the shot, and it's supposed to add another layer of protection along with the COVID vaccine. And it's supposed to be, and it's mainly beneficial for patients that are at greater risk. So if you have diabetes, or if you have high blood pressure or heart disease or a transplant recipient, monoclonal antibodies should be the first step taken based off of what I read. That should be the first step taken as an extra protection for patients that are compromised. And when I was looking in the notes that my mom took, they discussed that and they said, oh, it's no need for that at this time because the remdesivir and the dexamethasone is working. Meanwhile, remdesivir and dexamethasone come with a host of side effects. One of the side effects that stuck out to me with remdesivir is trouble breathing, rapid heartbeat. I didn't bring my list down of all this stuff because I don't want to go too deep into that. But look them up, remdesivir and dexamethasone. Look up the side effects, those medications. To be honest, I wasn't super concerned because God has brought my dad through so much. He has raised him up time and time again, from a hernia surgery to having a stroke, and them telling him that he'll never walk again, he'll never talk again, he'll be in a wheelchair the rest of his life. And God raised him up, restored him to the point that you didn't even know he had a stroke unless we told you or he told you. And then when God blessed him with a kidney, he would always say, God gave me this kidney. This is my kidney. God blessed me with this kidney. And I watched this man gracefully go through dialysis for 3 years. 3 years go through dialysis while he kept saying, God is going to give me a kidney. God is going to give me a kidney. And God blessed him with a kidney. And he was going on his 17th year with his kidney that God gave to him. And so, I'm sorry, I got a little bit off track and a little bit excited. I lost my train of thought. But if you look up the side effects of these medications, because my dad went in the hospital with no breathing issues too. Let me say that. He went into the hospital with no breathing issues. And so for him to go in with no breathing issues and get to a point where they're saying okay, he's well enough that he can come home with oxygen until the next day. Now he has to go back to the ICU. Now he needs 70% oxygen. Now he needs 80% oxygen. Now he needs 100% oxygen. What? I don't understand, So the side effects of those drugs, once again, were of concern to me. And it was also of concern to me that you wouldn't give him the monoclonal antibodies to begin with. You give him all these drugs. He hasn't really been eating or drinking like that. So just imagine a cocktail of drugs sitting in your system and you haven't eaten any food. I talked to somebody else whose father was in the hospital. He was talking about how they had to advocate for them to give his father vitamin C and zinc and vitamin D and things of that. Again, we wasn't thinking about that. I'm thinking my dad is going to the ER. They're going to give him a few fluids, some IV, check his vitals. He'll be back home the next day. that day, actually, or the next day, because he went early in the morning. But, at most 3 days before he comes home. And so then another thing that was baffling to me is they thought he might have had a blood clot because he was having trouble breathing. But they can't give him the dye to give him a CT scan. But we're going to treat him as if it's a blood clot, and we're going to give him blood thinners. Or his blood pressure was dropping. We think he may be losing blood somewhere, so we're going to give him a blood transfusion. Remdesivir also affects your kidneys. It can cause acute kidney disease. So let's just say by the time it was all over with, my dad had a blood transfusion that we don't know if he needed. He had been given blood thinners for a blood clot that they thought he had. They couldn't check, all the stuff with just, we can't do that because of the kidney. But you're treating him with the same protocol that people who aren't a transplant patient, a kidney transplant patient, you're treating him with the same protocol that people who aren't kidney transplant patients or heart transplant patients, you're giving them the same treatment instead of looking at a different treatment for those types of patients in those situations. None of it makes sense, if you follow me. So, like I said, by the end of it, he had a blood transfusion. He had a blood thinners. They gave him, all these different medications, 3 medications. They said they had 3 different medications to raise his blood pressure. They had given him all that, and none of it was working to raise his blood pressure. He ended up on a ventilator. He ended up on dialysis. This man hadn't been on dialysis since he got his kidney in 2005. So he hadn't been on dialysis since then, since prior to receiving the kidney. And so needless to say, I thank God for being God. And I thank God for being God. Because if God hadn't centered me, and it's crazy because I feel like in his own way, God was preparing me for something, but I didn't know what. Because I had been struggling with drinking for a minute. I had been drinking, and then I would stop, and I would go back to drinking again to the point where I was like diagnosed with pre-diabetes. And that scared me. So that's really when I said, okay, enough is enough. And I stopped. Right. So stopped drinking in September of 2021. And if you know me, I used to throw them back. Like I wasn't going outside without drinking. I'd be drinking in the house. I'm going through pints, half pints, fifths. And dark liquor was my drink of choice. So I stopped that in September of 2021. And thank God I did. Because if I was still drinking right now, only God knows what I would be doing to myself. As far as how drunk I would be getting, trying to drink the pain away, trying to rationalize everything in my human self, Yeah, God is good. That's all I'm going to say to that. And I'm going to come back with more videos on my journey, like throughout this process. But only thing I want to say to y'all is if you have to take a loved one to the hospital with COVID, especially if they're elderly or if they're compromised, like I said, if they have diabetes, they have heart disease, they have kidney disease, kidney transplant, any of those types of things, they're more at risk. If you have the time, if it's a life or death situation, yeah, you got to get them to the nearest hospital as soon as possible. But if you have the time, I would suggest calling different hospitals and seeing if you can get information on the protocols that they have in place, seeing if you can get information on their quarantine period, because I do believe that I read something that said that they quarantine period and keeping people away from their family is against the law. Like there's no law that says that we can't come in here. I've read about people getting arrested for trying to take their loved ones out of the hospitals because the hospital won't release them. Like it's just been so many things that have come out since this has happened. And then another thing that doesn't make sense. They wouldn't let us visit him while he was awake, while he was able to talk to us, any of that. But in his final moments, they allowed us to come in. put on the gowns. Like we had to talk to him, but prior to that, we had to talk to him over the iPhone, Google Duo, iPad, stuff like that. But in his final moments, they allowed us to put on the gown and put on the mask and put on the glasses and go in the room and be with him. Why couldn't we do that while he was coherent and alive and able to talk to us and interact with us? These are the things that are bothering me. When I say January 20th haunts me, for lack of a better word or a lack of a better way to express it, that date lingers in my mind. And I'm not going to say I hate that date, but it's the date that changed everything. And so I just encourage people to do their due diligence. Find out what type of protocols these hospitals have in place. It may have calmed down now because they're saying, oh, we're not, and the numbers are not as high as that, whatever. But I just saw that some cities in China just went back on lockdown because of it. Omicron running rampant there or whatever. But do your homework. Advocate for your loved ones to be given zinc, vitamin D, vitamin C. Advocate to be able to go in there and see your loved ones, because why do we have to stay away from our people for 20 days, but you could come back to work after 5 days, 10 days tops. Students can come back into the CPS school building after 5 days of quarantining. But we can't go see our loved ones in a hospital who they're going through this alone. My person that I know that works at the hospital, they were trying to check on him. They told her that if she goes over there, she's going to lose her job because she doesn't work in that department. What is the secret? What are y'all doing? What are y'all doing? And so, pardon, the puffiness in my eyes. I've been crying a lot. I just left church a little while ago. Cried there. It's an interesting season in my life. And through everything, even though I hate the way that things turned out, and I'm not going to say I hate the way that things turned out. I would have preferred for my dad to go peacefully. Like if he was going to pass, I feel like we should have just kept him at home and just let him pass on the couch or whatever. It was like a roller coaster, a whirlwind, trying to get in touch with somebody at the ER over the 3 days. You calling, nobody's answering the phone, or you leaving messages, nobody's calling you back. You can't get through. You can't get an update. You can't find out what's going on. Like it was a roller coaster. And then it's like, oh, it's good. He's coming home. Then it's like the very next day, then it takes a turn for the worse. And so he entered on the 20th, and by the 31st, he was rest in peace. And I know there are families who have gone through this, and that's why I'm speaking about it, because it's one thing to hear from a nurse or a doctor, what they're doing in these hospitals. Hearing it firsthand from a family who's experienced what I feel like the hospital was doing is experimenting. The statement is always made by somebody that I know, close to me, that it's a medical practice. And I believe more than ever, like I've always known that and believe that because it's called medical practice. But like I see firsthand how they don't really know. And I'm not blaming them, but they don't really know. They just trying this and trying that and doing this and doing that and hoping for the best, hoping that it works out. But in the midst of it all, I thank God for surrounding me with spiritual people, spiritually minded people, spiritually grounded people, who let me know that through everything, God is still sovereign. God is still in control. God doesn't make mistakes, even when people do. God doesn't make mistakes. And so why this had to happen, I'm still struggling with it. Why it had to happen, how it happened, I'm still struggling with it. But I keep getting hints and bits and pieces here and there letting me know, showing me like kind of why. And I'll go into more depth as I continue to make more videos. So do your due diligence. Never thought that this would touch our doorstep. And the kicker is it happened 4 or 5 months prior to my two aunts, which were my dad's last living sisters that he grew up with. I had one aunt pass in August of 2021, the end of August of 2021. Then a week later, my other aunt passed like September 1st or 2nd of 2021. And then January, my dad, 2022, January 31st, 2022. And it's baffling. It's all baffling to me. But yeah, I just wanted to share that. Do your homework, do your due diligence. Don't just send your people to these hospitals blindly. Fight for your rights, advocate, demand answers, demand, like, why can't I stay here with him? Why can't I stay in the ER with my loved one? Why can't I stay? I've already been exposed. I brought him here. I'm living in the house with him. Make it make sense. So that's all I got for y'all today. I'll be back with more videos. Like I said, I'm relaunching my podcast, and I'm going to be doing conversations with the elders, getting some insight from my mom on some things. I'm going to be doing his side, her side, me and my husband weighing in on some things, because we definitely see the world different, and, and just, some other things, So y'all stay tuned, okay? Coast Porch, and I'm out.